Hello everybody, this is Alex from Hardcore Guides, bringing my guide for Ninja Gaiden 3, Razor's Edge, on Master Ninja difficulty. Today we are doing Day 6, and does anybody else get the vibe of, like, Modern Warfare 2 from this specific chapter? Like, you know, that snowmobile level? Not that entire section, well, pretty much that entire level. Yeah, it's been a while, but, like, I every time I play this specific level in this game, I think of that one, so... upon coming, once you find your way through this, you're going to be ambushed, of course, by assassins. And the first one, relatively simple and straightforward, Steel on Bone, and you just have like two of them to fight. So take them out as you will. And then upon coming down here, is going to be a really kind of strange area that just seems to have no good visual, like, cue of where anything's at, of course, but that's where being able to find our pathing comes in handy, or, clicking in the right stick to kind of find your way through. And then eventually, of course, we have to find another group of enemies, but luckily this group of enemies specifically doesn't have anything too hard, I would say. Enemies that I would consider that are too hard at this point would basically be like Magnafiends. I wouldn't even consider like the Crystal guys to be really that difficult either. I'd say like the upper tier fiends at this point are pretty much what you kind of want to be worried about, because once you've gone to like Day 6, you've pretty much done a good chunk of this game at this point. That you're probably already used to fighting like heavies, and you're probably already used to fighting just regular enemies. Yeah, actually, I forgot about motorcycle enemies being here too. That's actually going to cause some problems. Of course, when it comes to taking out motorcycle enemies, I usually just kind of dodge, use bow, and luckily for me, I did end up getting actually a UT off of that first guy, and luckily it did kind of go into the next one. There's not too many motorcycle enemies in that section anyway to really be too troublesome. They're just annoying at that point. If there was like a ton of them, then yeah, it'd be a problem, but luckily there wasn't. So, I actually kind of forgot about them being there. I just got done editing this video and I completely missed it, so that happens. I kind of edit pretty fast and just don't really pay too much attention to everything. So, something else you can do to them is you can have that upgrade where you can aim in air and slow down time. But I do believe it requires key to do, so be careful of that. Immediately coming into this next area, just go ahead and dodge the Gorilla's attack. You can unfortunately not get a Steel on Bone from that. But then again, that could be a random thing. I'm not sure. I've never really tested that theory much. So if anybody knows, go for it, of course. Let that Steel on Bone ride. But this area, I pretty much just whip out the Kusari and just kind of just go for UTs and just basically just heavy attacks in general. Just to try to get some OTs going. Or at least, for the very most part, try to hopefully get a Steel on Bone. Now, I've explained this in the previous video, but I don't really need to explain it here again, of course. I'm just not going to, because it's just so much repetition of explaining things. But when it comes to snakes, Steel on Bones are a lot harder to hit. But the thing I didn't want to go too far into explaining was, of course, the gorillas and how I deal with their Steel on Bones. But, if you can muster up the ability to get one, then yeah, go for it, of course. Now, this section isn't necessarily timed, but this next part that just happened seems to be timed. So the first part where you're fighting like most of the, I don't exactly remember what they're called, but they spawn from homunculus. I used to call them chimeras, but chimera is like the actual full-on, seemingly triple designed version of them, because that would make the most sense, of course. But I believe that they're probably just either homunculus or just gorilla snake enemies. So when you already defeat all of them, of course, enemies are going to spawn, and I would say just get out there as fast as you can. I wouldn't worry too much about building up like Nimpo or building up anything specifically. Well, speaking of Nimpo, I would still recommend having just enough Nimpo for this part, and of course I always run Inferno stuff. Not true Inferno, but I always just run regular run-of-the-mill Nimpo for every situation. You can run it whatever you like, because different Nimpo does have different effects. So, like for example, the Piercing Wind kind of like goes through enemies, I believe. And then on top of that, you have the Fire Wheels themselves that just kind of allows you to heal at a potentially much better rate. But that's more of like a subjective, personal take on what you prefer to use. Or was it Piercing Void that I think was that one called? What the hell was the Wind one called? I don't know. Anyway, So coming up, we got to deal with fiends now, and this is where things are going to get a lot tougher. So of course, I'm trying to trigger into getting Steel on Bones on the small fiends so I can just get rid of them, but that usually never works. And I'm still sticking with the Kusari for this part, mainly just for the fact of having good AoE damage and just good AoE combos in general. And I do have it level 3, luckily, so I'm able to do at least 4 hits. And the thing about this, about the Kusari Gama, is it's got such a nice, easy range that it just makes getting Steel and Bones a lot easier than, like Dragon Sword, of course. Because Dragon Sword is pretty damn basic when it comes to getting, sorry, excuse me. It's a lot easier to get, like, Steel on Bones with, like, say, the Scythe, or maybe even, like, the Lunar Staff, or, even the Kusari, just because of the fact that it has such a nicer range. I would even bet that the dual swords probably have better advantages of that, too. But then again, when it comes to Dragon Sword, I just kind of just slide dodge straight into, just triangle. Speaking of getting feelings of different games, I every time I slide down this icicle, I know this game came out way before it, of course, but every time I slide down this ice path, I always kind of think of Jedi Fallen Order. Jedi Fallen Order, I cannot speak. I always think of that. There's like a specific section with it, and speaking of which, we're getting a sequel, and I don't know whether or not I'm going to actually end up getting it or not. I don't really plan on it right now. Maybe in the future. I didn't hate the first one. I just didn't care too much for it, but that's my own opinion. I just felt like it could have used more stuff, and it looks like Jedi Fallen Order 2 is going to definitely amp that up just a tad, so I'm kind of looking forward to that, doing it, but I don't think I'm going to get day one, but this is me we're talking about. I said that about Dead Space, and look what happened. So, yeah. Anyway, this part, essentially, all I do is I just run back, charge UT with Kusari. I love this weapon at this point. I used to not actually care that much for, like, flails and chained weapons or whatever. I'm not specifically knowledgeable about weapons, but I never used to care about it very much, especially if you watch my older Ninja Gaiden videos. You'll definitely see, me not using specific weapons as much. However, I did use the flail quite often when it came to Ninja Gaiden 1, though, and I mostly used it for the sake of getting rid of the hell were they called? Those zombie enemies, if you guys remember what I'm talking about, like those ones that kind of just are really slow-moving, don't do anything. But that section down there, nothing too bad, but this one's going to get much worse. Just like immediately right after, it's going to get much worse. So I would say, I would highly recommend just going for Steel on Bones, just to kind of just get rid of these fiends. Just completely delete them from life. Because they're going to be very, very irritating. I'd say priority number 1 should just be getting rid of these fiends, even when like the other enemies start to show up, because these guys are just complete assholes and just ruin everything. And this is where I already forgot the name of it. Yeah, the Kusari Gama kind of just comes in handy, is the fact that, like, after you do a Steel on Bone, Ryu will actually send out his next, like, ball and chain toward the next enemy, so that way he can get a nice, easy grab. So, yeah, again, I'd recommend just going for that. I switched to Dragon Sword for the sake of using it on the Magna Fiend, just because I have a specific combo that I use on him, and you'll see that eventually. So, yeah, I'd say, even though I said, make sure you prioritize the fiends, like the smaller fiends, which I still recommend, of course, don't forget to try to shoot down the Magna Fiend. That's something else you probably should take into consideration. And try to save your Nimpo. I don't know if I used it on him, but I believe I used it on a different fiend that shows up later. I think there's another one. There could be a second one that shows up when I use it on him to make my life just a tad easier. So, save your Nimpo as much as you possibly can. Try not to use it on this guy. And this is where I'm going to be starting to show... Oh, okay, I did use it. Never mind. Alright, well, if you have Nimpo, then use it on the big guy. That's something I can tell you right now. That's one piece of advice I can give you. The combos that I tend to do is just... basically like a couple of squares into like a couple of triangles and just go for like, heavy attacks. But see, as he blocks and then he pushes me back every time I attack him, and then I go behind him, right? You see that? That's the combo pattern that I want you guys to kind of get down for yourselves. It doesn't matter exactly what your combo is, because eventually he'll just do it anyway. I recommend maybe doing some heavies in there just to kind of make him potentially try to, knock you back faster. Because it seems like that might be the key trick to getting that to work. But it still doesn't necessarily matter what combo, because eventually he'll just knock you back anyway. And yeah, just every time that he pushes you back after, you know, he blocks, and you'll hear a sound effect, you'll see a visual cue. You know, you'll see all that, you'll hear all that, of course. And after that happens, you know, just dodge behind him and just continue the same thing again. And Nimpo does work wonders against just the one, typically, because sometimes it actually just gets an OT off of it, just at least with the Inferno version that I have. So, also, I didn't edit this part very well. I wonder if I die. So, something I want to talk about real quick is I have a very particular spot that I end up trying to hide into, but it turns out that it didn't work. So this room has a bunch of pillars, and the two on, like, you know, the far end here that don't have, like, a fence between them, I recommend trying to hide between them, so that way you can get a nice, good UT charge and just get away from their magic ball attacks. So I got real lucky there where I just didn't, you know, get hit by the second one. The second, like, you know, magic ball that could have killed me. I guess the first one still counted as, like, damage, so. But yeah, this combo right here against the sword mages in particular are really good, because sword mages are a little easier to take down with combos than they are the other enemy types, but they're also just a lot more worse to deal with, just because of the fact that they have that multi-magic ball attack that splits in multiple different directions, and it's just terrible to deal with. Because, like, they group up together and they shoot all of their balls at once in a different direction. That's what I mean. It's not one specific ball that goes in a different way, but yeah. Hiding behind the pillar could, you know, kind of help you there. That's decent cover if you need it. And then on top of that, if you're feeling froggy, you know, and you want to do it, then you could go for a nice, simple, like, you know, light into heavy attack combo to kind of just eliminate, or even possibly get a faster OT, because it seems like they have less health than, like, the regular tankier varieties, and they seem to kind of die easier to combo attacks than most, but that's just my own view on that. And again, you know, I have to reiterate, I'm not exactly a complete expert on the game or anything like that particularly. I'm just kind of a dude that just does things. I don't even know why I bought the other Nimpo, to be honest with you. I'm not going to use it. So this part here, I just run back into the room that I kind of came from. Not exactly like the same door, but like just this part of the room that I came from, I should say. And I just kind of go back, use, you know, my flail and just kind of just do some heavy attacks and try to get some UTs going, because the Dragon Fiends are very aggressive on here, and they're just going to keep trying to pounce on you. So, of course, something else to kind of keep, you know, wary of is watching out for that pounce attack, because, you know, that could easily just grab you and potentially do a lot of damage, and that's something you don't want. Luckily, these guys are not as strong / tanky as they used to be, like in Ninja Gaiden 2. They definitely seem to die a lot faster, and being aggressive and doing combos against them, and even if they were to try to retaliate by hitting you back, you know, just block, dodge behind them, you know, that kind of stuff. Don't know why the game decided to spawn this guy in and then just not give me the advantage of just, you know, getting that bow shot in when he immediately spawned. But yeah, right there, I'd recommend saving your Nimpo for that specific fight. Save your Nimpo, unless you want to go for the tried and true, you know, well, tried and true would be the Nimpo, of course. If you want to go for the other attack, like I do, the combo attack from behind, then you can go for that as well. So this right here is going to be a lot more dangerous. Granted, if you did save your Nimpo for this, that's also not a bad idea either. You know, take out the Magnafina as you want, but I used Nimpo for him, just to kind of get that OT and get him out of the way, because I was close to dying, so I needed that health upgrade. Or health upgrade, I mean, I needed that, that health back. So pretty much just do what you've been doing to, you know, White Alchemists at this point. They pretty much just be kind of, they've almost become kind of like fodder in a way. Not necessarily completely, but, you know, they've become definitely a lot less dangerous than they used to be. I can tell you that at this point, because they don't do much new stuff. I mean, the worst that they'll ever get is if they happen to be with other enemies, and that hardly ever happens. And, you know, that might be something that probably happens, like, in the challenge trials, maybe. Because I think this game has trials. I don't remember. But that'd definitely be one of those things of, like, you know, a trial would have. But this is just, you know, campaign. They don't seem to actually utilize their effectiveness as much. Now, granted, I haven't gone through Ultimate Ninja fully yet, so I wouldn't be surprised if they started adding more lackeys with them, because that would definitely make them a lot harder to deal with. But granted, you know, I just UT mostly anyway, so there's that. So yeah, pretty much for this, you know, once again, I'm just going to do the same thing. UTs, simple stuff. I don't have any specific great advice for these fights besides UT and Steel on Bones, and just go for, you know, nice Kasari kills or whatever weapon you prefer, of course. But I do want to say this. Immediately after that third wave or whatever it was, you want to go for a charged UT straight into the Magnafine and then start going for combos. Now, getting that Steel on Bone is really hard and really time specific. Also, him throwing that scythe, if you're just like right near him, then he'll probably hardly ever hit you. But something else you want to kind of be careful of too is getting hit by that uppercut attack. That's something you definitely don't want to get by. But as soon as you kill the first one, another one's going to spawn. And try to find out where he's going to spawn at, and then just start charging like at least a level 1 UT for the most part. Whatever weapon, doesn't matter. Start charging at least a level 1 UT, and then just get that off. So at least you can be protected from any potential attacks that he might throw at you. And then, of course, you know, I'm just going to stick with the typical combo stuff. Yes, I did get Nimpo back, but I'm not going to waste it on these guys. You know, I just essentially bought a health upgrade. So if you've been following along and trying to save your health upgrades for when I use them, then that's pretty much when you're going to want to use it. That's not the best spot to use it, but, you know, that's something that you could do if you want to keep up with, you know, how I do things, which is fine. So this next area, just run back to where the bird was, and then just starts, you know, charging up that UT, especially with Kusarigama, just because it does so much damage against just the gorilla types. It's ridiculous. And then, of course, dogs, so I could either just use my uppercut attacks, but I decided to go with just sticking with the normal weapon and just hitting them pretty much, because they can't do anything whenever you're comboing them. They, for the most part, they can't. Dogs are still dangerous regardless, but seemingly they just honestly have a weird problem where they just cannot fight back while they're getting hit. It's odd. So, yeah, once they're done, these guys are going to spawn, and I pretty much just kind of like get as far back as I can. I go into the other side of the room, hide behind cover, just slightly out of the way so that I can still see them. And then plus, I'm still close within their vision, so that way they can, you know, come for me whenever they want to, pretty much, and just, you know, basically, they can pathfind their way to me. I mean, they're going to anyway, but, like, still, I just want them to be within, you know, vision of both me and them, so that way they can run straight into, you know, face first, straight into my UT. That's kind of the idea. So, yeah, looks like door's locked, so I pretty much just kind of just, you know, run back, charge UT, run back, charge UT. And then if the camera is still, like, seemingly focused... Okay, the door was not locked. That's a different part of the map then. If the camera is still kind of a little further back from Ryu, that's a good sign that they're still enemies. Which is something I actually honestly really like about this game, is the fact that whenever enemies do spawn, the camera does change to make it kind of more visible for you to see what's going on. Also, it looked like I did no damage there. But if you wanted to get a Crystal Skull to either get Nimpo back, or even possibly get your health back, or extra karma, or whatever you want, slide dodge... I should just say slide. Just slide underneath that wooden area there, and there you go. You'll find the Crystal Skull eventually. But be fair warned, after you do the Crystal Skull, you will have to refight the enemies again that did spawn normally. Alright, so this is where things are going to get a lot more tougher to explain. So this is the Fiend Ryu, basically. And the trick that I'm doing here is I'm blocking, and then I'm pressing triangle before he attacks. And I do take a hint of damage, which is fine. But the idea is, for this fight specifically, is you want to go for... Either you could do what I'm doing and do counters into a Zuna drop, or you could just try to go for a Zuna drop yourself. And I just kind of go for that. Now, granted, there is something else that you could do. And I'm going to show off real quick, just Lunar Staff. Lunar Staff, Izuna drops, is much preferred for this fight. Which I don't think I actually have level 2, so I can't do, you know, that. So yeah, if you want to go for non-counter attacks, then you could just use Lunar Staff to kind of go into it. And this is where one of the times I use Lunar Staff for. Lunar Staff's still cool and badass, it's just... I end up using Dragon Sword more often in this game than anything else. Now, attacks that you should watch out for, I'd say just watch out for like those slam attacks. Just let him finish that off and then go for the Izuna drop. And again, if you want to take the counter route that I did, but you'll still take damage, though, which is the problem, but you can do that. Now, for this next fight, I highly recommend you buy the Scythe. And potentially upgrade it to level 2. At the very least, upgrade to level 2. And then, what we're going to do is we're going to spam this the entire time, and it's just going to delete them. So that's kind of the idea I'm going to go for. I'm going to cheese the hell out of this boss. And I don't remember exactly who I learned this from, but I can tell you that, you know, his mic quality was terrible, I can tell you that. But shout out to whoever that was. I'm sorry I forgot your name, but I did learn this. And he didn't specifically use it on this fight, but I am. So, of course, something you kind of want to watch out for is whenever he's, you know, changing into different weapons and then, you know, trying to charge up a UT. When you start getting low on health, just, you know, whip out your Nimpo. But for those that are wondering exactly what type of attack and what buttons I'm pressing, I'm essentially just dodging every single time. I'm slide dodging, and then I hit up, you know, while slide dodging, and then I rotate the stick counterclockwise, so toward the left, and then I just hit triangle, and that should work. It should feasibly work every single time, and then, of course, like I said, it just kind of deletes them. Now, where exactly, you know, like, how many times do I recommend doing it? Like, is there any specific timing I'm worrying about? Like, no, not necessarily. I'm just spamming the hell out of it. That's pretty much what I'm doing. And then, of course, I buy health upgrade when I'm getting low. So, I think that's, like, my last health upgrade I'm allowed to have at that point. Granted, if you have 45 scarabs, then you can get up to level 5 if you wanted. But, yeah. So, in terms of things to watch out for while you're doing the spin attack, for the most part, you're kind of invincible. But something to try to kind of keep in mind is you want to dodge to at least, you know, maybe like the right of him to kind of just stay away from like specific weapon hits just in case. So that's my recommendation for that. It may be really cheesy and it may be really cheap, but this game is really cheesy and cheap. Granted, for those that are wondering how to beat him properly, Azuna drops are going to be your best friend, and you basically just kind of want to wait for him to finish specific attacks that he does. With the Scythe, he doesn't do too many attacks. He doesn't have too much long combo attacks. The Scythe is still dangerous. Now, granted, whenever he's charging up the Scythe UT, what you want to do is after that UT has launched, you want to like dodge toward him. Or, no, not toward him. You want to dodge away from the UT shot itself, but you want to be close proximity of him, so that way you can go in for that Azuna drop. So there's very specific times that you'll have to learn the Azuna drop. Now, granted, you know, you can do it with the Dragon Sword, you can do it with Lunar, you can do it with pretty much any other weapon you prefer. Whatever you've gotten used to. But for those that don't want to take the cheap way out, yeah, Azuna drops are basically going to help you out a ton. And counterattacks in the second phase of that fight are not going to help very much. They're pretty much just almost a death sentence at that point if you go for counterattacks. They're not that useful in the second phase. In the first phase, they're fine, but in the second one, no. Now, granted, I don't know why I didn't bother just using the spinning triangle move to begin with, you know, on the first phase. So that's something else you could probably just consider if you wanted to. I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. I'm just failing hard. But don't worry, folks. I do eventually get up there. I'm just being stupid as hell, I guess. Seemingly just letting go of, I guess, both trigger buttons, which I'm kind of glad that this game eventually fixed in terms of this section, just having the shittiest shoulder buttons ever. They just take forever to go through, and, you know, you don't get any speed up or anything, so. But anyway, that ends off this day, and I will see you guys for the next one. So as always, take care, everybody.